Welcome. I'm so excited for the agenda we have today and tomorrow. Hopefully, and equally exciting to me is talking to all of you and see how diverse all of you are and how broad a set of things you're doing. That's really, really exciting. What this talk is about is not what I think, but what all of you are already doing. And I hope I can knit it together into a bigger picture of what each of you is doing in your own slice. There is a paper associated with it. It was just posted on our website a while ago, a month ago or so, by the same name. I started with a particular problem. Most of us, 700 million of us, the top 10% of the world's 7 billion people, have a great lifestyle. Rich in energy, rich in space, buildings, housing, education, healthcare. And I asked the question, how do we have 7 billion people get the same lifestyle? And I realized that what all of you are doing is the only way we can bridge resources without destroying the planet. We need a 10x in resource utilization multiplication without needing 10x in the number of doctors, the number of buildings, the number of cars. So with that, I said, what is our group of portfolios? And I was literally looking at the portfolio doing almost everything we want to do. And I have to say, I'll tout our horn in venture capital. There isn't a portfolio as diverse as in this room in any venture firm. Way more diverse. And I have this feeling that if we can think of some technological way to try something, iterating, blundering, making mistakes, we'll figure it out. Almost anything we can imagine can be invented, enabled by people like you. It takes a little bit of foolishness, a little bit of arrogance, a little bit of hubris. Nobody else can do it, but I can. And a lot of pursuing dreams, and a lot of hard ups and downs. It's because of this one quote, one of my favorite quotes, and I won't read it to you, but it takes unreasonable people who don't want to fit in to really create something unique, different, a big step. And we pretend like we know the vision, but we don't. But we can invent it. We can try things, find the mistakes, iterate, zigzag, left, right, go there. Because we don't say, oops. I have a, we don't say why something can't be done. Skeptics do that. Pessimists have a problem for every solution you find. We say, why not? Why can't it be done? Again, Silicon Valley, in my view, is not a culture place. It's a culture. It's a culture, a mindset of can-do, arrogance, trying things, hubris, all of those things. Many seedlings die, but a few survive and make a very large impact. All of you know this, so I won't spend too much time on this. I hate the people who critique entrepreneurs, yet fail to try anything themselves. And they never fail because they fail to try. I'd much rather prefer. So last August, I looked at all major parts of the non-governmental GDP in the United States and said, what couldn't be reinvented? Not by 5% better, 10% better, but by 100% better, 500%. Like could we do large multiplication of resources. And surprise, there was no part of GDP that couldn't be reinvented. Every area I looked at, one of you was already working on it. And I'll go more into, this. And hopefully I'll cover each of these. But what also surprised me, actually shocked me, looking back 30 years, I couldn't find one disruption that wasn't called by an entrepreneur or a founder-led company. Retail wasn't innovated by Walmart, by Amazon. Media wasn't done by the media companies. Space wasn't innovated by the space companies. You can go on, and I won't go through all of them, but you get the idea. I couldn't come up with one example in 30 years that large institutions could do. I couldn't also come up with one useful McKinsey report. But here was what was most exciting to me. I looked through the last 30 years, and I started in the entrepreneurial world in 1980. My first startup. In 82, I did Sun, and then I've been doing venture capital for a long time. There have never been more axes of innovation, brand new areas which you can combine and innovate with than now. And that's why the amount of innovation, in my view, over the next 10 years will explode 10x over what we've had. Because axes of innovations increase the possibilities. When you combine medical imaging with AI, when you combine 3D printing with new material science, you get very different things. And the cost of experimentation, trying something new, is going down. That's why I believe we are right at the beginning of a hyper cycle. And the cycle part is faded because I actually don't think it'll just be a cycle. It'll be a permanent hyper innovation cycle. Here's the tools we have that I can see today that you can combine in all kinds of ways to innovate. And I'm surprised when I look across the portfolio, most of you using some combination of these in very unusual ways. And most of the ones that I'll be talking about 10 years from now will not be these. I will be very short-sighted. And there's existing innovations that'll help. So what might health look like in 2050? Let's start with what Jeff Bezos called walking backwards. Start with 2050. Every consumer will be the CEO of his own health, informed by AI, not by a doctor, not subject to the whims of a doctor. I won't go through all the individual pieces in the interest of time, but there's so many of these. My personal goal is we go from the practice of medicine to the science of medicine. We eliminate the notion of symptom-based medicine or symptom-based diagnosis. I think that will fundamentally happen, and most things will be done differently. Almost free physicians for everybody, all 7 billion people on the planet having a personal primary care doctor. When they needed a personal psychiatrist, a personal oncologist, a personal cardiologist, all for about the cost of Google search. And then there's lots of biology tools, and I won't again go into all of them. Very exciting. Ginger.io is building a psychiatrist. LifeCore is building a cardiologist. There's so many companies working on disease detection and progression monitoring. And then companies really monitoring the way world should be monitored. Real imaging. And some of you are doing that, radically changing imaging. It shouldn't look like that fuzzy MRI or ultrasound you see today. And your blood test should give you 30,000 biomarkers, not 30. We only have 30 because humans can only look at 30 variables at a time, if that. But there are 30,000 biomarkers in every finger prick. Even drug discovery will be AI-driven. What might transportation look like? I actually think the Ubers of the world, the Volkswagens of the world will disappear. We'll have point-to-point transportation in most cities. Like if you want to go anywhere to anywhere in San Francisco, a little pod that never crashes, with streets dedicated to it, should not cost more than $1 a ride, far cheaper than San Francisco Muni, and point-to-point. And then there'll be flying taxis. So lots of tools allowing for innovation in transportation. I apologize, I'm going through this very fast. Public transportation, Voyage is doing on private campuses, flying electric planes. Good job, Duncan. Oh, this is one of my favorites. Elon Musk is talking about here to San Francisco to Shanghai in 30 minutes on a rocket through space. What year that happens, I don't know, but he's promising 10 or 15 years. But that's why it takes unreasonable people to do unreasonable things. Nobody else will even attempt it. Housing. It'll be dematerialized. My dream is that every house, every building takes 80% less materials. Space is used twice as much. Every restaurant in San Francisco is empty right now. Shouldn't be the case. WeWork and Airbnb are starting to address those. Housing should be dematerialized. It should be more efficiently used. It should be more dense. It should be carbon minimal. Dematerialization of society will be a major trend, and software, don't worry about it, Duncan. Software is starting to do that. And I think we will see a lot more of it. I think we will fundamentally reuse city design, rethink city design. What are the axes of innovation? Again, there are many. And I was surprised at how many of these all of you are using. Or it's just making a 500 square foot apartment. This is robotic transformer furniture. Hashia is here. Making a 500 square foot apartment behave like a 1,000 square foot apartment. Because the furniture moves, the bed goes in and out. You don't need 3 feet in front of your closet when you're not using your closet. All this kind of space efficiency. Momentum is eliminating kitchens in restaurants, making a much more. This machine has the output of a standard McDonald's and can fit inside a food truck. Robotic deliveries. Katera is rethinking how construction has to be done. Wirt is doing that. Factory-built houses. And my favorite, 3D printed houses. This should be printed this year. What might manufacturing look like in 2050? Dematerialized, efficient, just-in-time, very local. No inventory, no long supply chains, nothing made in China, taking 3 months to ship. You get the idea. And I'll let you, if you're interested, pursue these on your own. All of this is in my paper, and this slide deck is more than available. Many axes of information. My favorite is generative design. You can take out every part of this building that isn't structural, and that's material saved. Metal, composites, investment casting, robotics, AI-based design and verification. I'll give you some examples of all these things. Blockchain-based supply chains. Yes, shitty robots is how robots should be done. A KUKA arm shouldn't weigh 3 tons. Vicarious is building an assembly line worker. Scott Phoenix is here. We don't need people, humans, doing mind-numbing robotic jobs. Berkshire is changing the supply chain, the warehousing. All of you doing 3D printing of one sort or another. Almost every manufacturing process will be cheaper, faster, better, more agile. All of you are already working on it. This bicycle was 3D printed in carbon fiber. This shoe was customized to a foot, 3D printed entirely. These are some of the materials. Even forks and knives can be 3D printed, giving designers more freedom. Your normal wrench will have much less material in it. What might food and ag look like in 2050? Far less land, far less chemical, far less factory farming. Let me give you some examples. There's so many axes of innovation in food. I originally thought food isn't open to innovation, but when I looked, it was. This is the piece that surprises me. Every area I looked into, even hamburgers, was open to innovation. Even construction. Hopefully, all of you tasted the Impossible Burger yesterday. 80% less water input. It's actually 95% less land needed on the planet. This is how we go from 10% of the world's population to 100% being fed well and healthier. And of course, my favorite, 80% less cruelty to animals. Eggs and dairy. Blue River, which of all people, John Deere bought from us, used AI to reduce weeding, mechanically robotic weeding, so you don't have to do chemicals, glycophosphates. You can do plant-by-plant fertilizer dosing in 1 million plant feed because it's robotic. Far less fertilizer, far less insecticide, herbicide. Vertical farming, this particular thing can produce 4 tons of food per acre. Crop intelligence. Can we do the same thing and make financial services accessible? I think in financial services, inclusion, and many of you have heard me talk about it, and fairness should not only be the norm and available to everybody. I actually think all the people with fancy wealth advisors will do far worse than somebody who just relies on AI like Google at very little cost. And I'm very excited about that. Credit should be pervasive, easier, and not mediated by humans. I'll tell you my favorite story. Frida from Pymetrics is hopefully here. When they'd used a machine to replace interviewing, diversity increased 26%. Humans were way too biased. These are recruiters for Fortune 500 companies trained not to be biased. and meeting every compliance requirement, diversity increased 25%. I think the same will happen in financial services, whether it's insurance or loans or access to investment opportunities. They will be dematerialized, no humans needed. Lots of new axes of innovation. Is even here? I love this company because essentially providing, in my view, weekly salary insurance for hourly employees. That's the kind of service we need. Square helping small business, Stripe and Fundbox, so many exciting services that suddenly don't need big banks, big financial institutions. We can bypass them all. Hopefully, by now you get my point. Every area, even the hard ones, energy and sustainability, we don't have enough talent flowing into this area because we hyped it too much, and now we don't have investors ready to invest, so we don't have the best PhDs going into this area. But I'm still hopeful that we can decarbonize. I'm pretty optimistic that this will work. This is a fusion project that's just getting started, one of my favorites, headed by the head of the Plasma Fusion Lab at MIT. Of course, QuantumScape, changing automotive batteries, or Natron changing grid storage, building efficiency, even cleaning up flue gases of old processes like steel mills to produce new products from exhaust gases. All very exciting. Education should be free. I think all 7 billion people on the planet should have a personal AI tutor for, again, about the cost of a Google search. And these systems will serve humans. Plenty of axes of innovation. There were so many I couldn't even list. My personal goal on the nonprofit side is to make high school education free and a personal education tutor available to every child on this planet. Hopefully, some of you can help. Here's the fundamental fact people don't realize. When you attempt unreasonable things, you fail often. But I like to say, if there's a 90% chance of failure, there's a 10% chance of changing the world. And those are pretty good odds. If we take 1,000 or 10,000 shots on goal, that's a lot of really transformative projects, even if 90% fail. And these projects almost never fail completely. They still make a difference. This is all really rewarding, exciting. This is all what all of you are doing. That's what's so great to do. It's what gets me to work 80 hours a week, every day. Gets me excited every morning, and it gets me excited to be here. Hopefully, we can have a little bit of a dialogue. I probably have time for a few questions. I did whip through that pretty fast. Do people have questions?
Tell us about the lessons from the energy decade from 2004 through 10. What happened, really?
So the question is, what's the lessons from the energy decade? First, I would say to you, it wasn't as unsuccessful as people think. Think about it. We have a whole bunch of unicorns in that space today. QuantumScape is really changing how automotive batteries are working. They will change transportation, both cars and trucks. And that's a pretty large contribution. Lanza is building 2 or 3 factories to clean up steel mills. Nobody talks about that. It's great to talk about the things that failed, because headlines like that are a lot of good clicks for the press. Viewglass, again, a unicorn valuation, making buildings more efficient. It's stunning glass. Every home, every building should have that. I could go on and on. There's quite a few interesting projects that were successful that never got written about, that are billion-dollar valuations today. And the companies I'm talking about got financed as unicorns in the last 3-6 months. So, and they have the potential to be 10x larger. So they are having an impact. Impossible Foods is changing sustainability. Having said that, there was a bunch of mistakes made. We got too excited, and whenever we get too excited, we overinvest in all the hype, and then get investors turned off. The lesson is you have to learn how to go through hype cycles well. And QuantumScape, LanzaTech, Viewglass, Impossible Foods, other companies navigated that fairly well. So, how are we doing for time? There's also this issue of when you rely on partners, and many of you have heard me say this, it doesn't matter whether it's in energy or others. You're going to be dependent on somebody else and their priorities, so you're likely going to fail. Too many energy companies relied on partners to make them successful. And most large companies, as you saw, they never innovate. Hopefully you got my point. And if anybody can think of one large innovation in the last 30 years that came from a big institution, I'd like to hear about it. The closest I could think of was Bank of America introducing the plastic credit card in the early 70s, almost 50 years ago. That was the closest large innovation I could think of. They put credit on plastic. But too many people were reliant on partners, to your question, and I think that was a mistake. And then, there's always these financial investors. Investors really go between fear and greed. There's nothing in between for investors. As entrepreneurs, you've seen that, felt that. I feel for all of you when it's hard to convince somebody of the obvious. But they believe in herd mentality, and there was a lot of that, and that set us back. Having said that, Breakthrough Energy Ventures was a fund we got started. Bill Gates was the leader in getting that together, and it's a $1 billion venture fund meant to go after the longer time frame of energy, which is the other big difference. Other questions? Yes.
Thank you, Vinod. You were talking about the non-government GDP part. Have you given any thought to the government GDP? How can you disrupt government?
Well, that's a much harder thing. But if all these services become free, many government programs were put in place for the bottom 30% of the population. And I think we'll reduce the need for that by making services so accessible. I hope that happens. But the most important idea I've seen was given on direct democracy. Skip the Senate and the House. That would be hard to do, but there was a compelling pitch made at TED this year on how AI could inform voters at a much better level without introducing the congressman or the senator, because voters would be much more informed, and without introducing the personal interests of the congressman or senator that biases the voting. That's the best idea I've seen, but it's a hard problem. Yes?
Yeah, great talk. And I was just wondering that a lot of the things you say about 2050 This thing that people say that the future is already here, is just unevenly distributed. So when you think about 2050, and you think about China, India, Europe, USA, different parts of the world, who will get first to 2050?
It's very hard to tell what will happen. The one thing about projecting into the future, and I never, ever call what I say predictions. I call them speculations. If you look back, if you look to 2050, or look back from 2050 to 2020, you are going to see a delta of change. If you look today, if you just said linear acceleration to 1990, in 1990, how much of today could anybody predict? Almost none. If you say the rate of change is accelerating, to predict 2050, you would have to have made today's forecasts in 2050 because the rate of change is accelerating. Nobody reasonable other than McKinsey would predict the future. They can just speculate. I know we are out of time. I'm around, so please feel free to talk about this, give me feedback. I'm developing this thesis. But what's most exciting to me is what all of you are doing. I hope each of you can see the piece you're working on and how much it contributes. I didn't talk about entertainment as much. Every part of human life can be accelerated. So thank you all for your contributions.